All right, folks, we have come to the final video for this whole RfR programs series. And the idea of this video is to talk about the future, what we see in store for us down the road, near or way down the road. And who better to talk about those ideas and that vision than the founder and president of RfR, as well as the executive director of RfR. We have with us Dr. Darrel Ray and Gayle Jordan. Hello, you two. Thanks so much for being here with me.
How exciting.
Good. Thanks for doing this. This is a great idea.
You bet. So this is the future of RfR. Dr. Ray, do you want to start off? How do you see, what do you see RfR being in 1 to 5, 10 years down the road?
Well, I want to first of all go backwards and say in 2009, when I started this whole damn thing, I had no clue where I was going, what I was going to do. And now it's turned out to be something I never dreamed of. So there, so with that caveat, I'm pretty confident we can talk about where we're going to be in a year or two. I'm not so confident I'd want to guess where we'll be in 10 years since I flunked so bad on that count originally. But I see an international expansion dramatically in the next 2 or 3 years. I think our infrastructure, you have to have infrastructure to make this work. And then you have to have volunteers and you have to have funding. You put all that together. And we've done that in the last 12 years since we started. And having that in place, we've laid the railroad tracks, mm-hmm. And now we just have to put some trains and some cars on those tracks. And we're building those tracks out into the Spanish-speaking world, and we're building them out into Europe, the United Kingdom. We already have a freight train going through Australia right now, to use that metaphor, and really getting started really nicely in New Zealand. So, of course, all those countries are English-speaking, and I'm looking, especially at the Spanish-speaking world, when you look at the size of that population, and it's traditionally been very Catholic and very religious, and it is changing. The Pentecostals are just overwhelming Spanish South America. I think there's tremendous need down there because we're seeing it from our perspective with people chatting in, but we don't have nearly enough Spanish volunteers, and we need a more dedicated Spanish railroad track, if you will. We need to split the tracks and make sure we have dedicated volunteers and dedicated systems that are based on what we've already got. And I think there'll be opportunities for other language groups. I just don't know where we'll go with those. I think once we get a good foundation to understand what we have to do to expand in the Spanish-speaking world, we'll be able to replicate that in maybe not as thoroughly, because smaller population groups aren't going to have as many volunteers, and we're going to have linguistically talented or people with linguistic skills to be able to do that. But for now, if my dream would be, if we are where we are now in 5 years with the Spanish-speaking world, that we are in the English-speaking world, that would just blow my mind. I think it's possible. I don't know how we're going to get there totally, though.
Yeah. Yeah. What about you? Share with us your vision of the future. What do you see is coming down the road? What is your wish list for RfR?
Well, I was just so enthralled by what Darrel was saying. It was like I was listening and hearing it for the first time all over again. It's such an exciting time, and I guess I'm going to claim right to answer the first question you asked, Darrel, about where the 1 and 2 years. I'm like Darrel. That's a little easier. The 5 or 10, I can tell you what. Less than a prediction and more of a hope. I hope at some point we're a relic. I hope we're sort of a punchline, recovering from what? Well, why? What? Because I hope that people don't have the experience of needing to recover from religion, but where we're going, absolutely. Darrel just nailed it on what we're doing internationally and the need, religion. It's the damage, the trauma is ubiquitous, and it's sort of universal. There are different types of damage that different types of religion all inflict, and different degrees of damage. And while we understand that, it's still, there's just still such a need.
Mhm.
all over the world, in every country and every type of religion and every people group. And so it is thrilling to see that unfold. And as Darrel said, we're already on that freight train coming through Australia. We have a strong leadership team, which of course is the key to all of this. It's why we've been from where Darrel mentioned in 2009 with his brilliant germ of an idea of maybe there's a need for this to where we are now. It has to do with dedicated leadership, an unbelievable volunteer force. I mean, we can't do anything without that. But when people ask me about that, and where we're going, and because of my interaction sometimes with donors and corporate donors, I'm asked this question quite a bit, where are we going with this? And so I'm able to talk a little bit about the international growth on the, in the domestic front. Eric Wells is our support groups director, and he's doing a phenomenal job of, again, it's all about leadership. When we find a leader who's willing to take on the responsibilities for pulling together a local group, we've been able to do that. Hopefully, I hope this will very soon be outdated. Right now, we're still doing that virtually, but there's potential for a support group in every community in the country. Even the most progressive of areas, there are people with a heritage of religious damage that need to get through it and talk through it, and all the things that our support groups are. So we have potential on the support group side, but one of my personal favorites about what we have been doing is what we began in 2019, which we call our fall excursion, and that's and I know there's a whole video series about that, so you can kind of listen to that one if that's a personal interest. But it's like a religion recovery weekend is kind of the shorthand that I use for that. Again, there is potential everywhere for that. We've been holding it in North Carolina. Awesome, because we're in the South and there's a real need for that. And it's within driving distance of, the whole Eastern Seaboard that folks can come to it. But what about the folks out West? I have a vision of having one in Texas and having one in Utah and having one in the Pacific Northwest. Anywhere it's going to be successful. And I want it to be accessible to folks who, it's a geographic barrier for some folks to just have our one a year in North Carolina. So I have this big vision of maybe trying to put those in. Now we will probably have to come up with replicate our teams a little bit, because Darrel and I are, we'd be running ourselves ragged if we're doing several of those a year, because they are awfully gratifying, but there are of course a lot of planning and a lot of work. Once again, it's all about the leadership. But I see the need for that. I see the potential for that. I see our ability to do that because of our wonderful leadership staff and all of our folks. So it's, I guess it has been since the beginning. I've been on this is coming into my 7th year, but since the beginning, it's always been an exciting organization to be part of, but I can't think of a more dynamic time to be part of Recovering from Religion right now.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. When I sort of hopped into this director position in 2019, I felt like I was sort of paddling out, about to catch a wave. And then 2020 hit, and we just kind of exploded, at least on the support group side. And I've seen so many volunteers come in during 2020 and the COVID pandemic, and I feel like we're kind of surfing this awesome wave, and we just have to make sure that we can see ahead and be able to plan and make sure that things are in place when we get to the next obstacle. Awesome. And, Gayle, I really like your long-term vision. I would love to be able to work myself out of position where we no longer need this anymore. And it's more like relegated to maybe a hobby status than an identity status. So, yeah. Dr. Ray, what do you think?
Well, I was going to say, if you look back when you came on, I think we had 29 groups officially and only like 20 groups that were actually doing anything. And you've just exploded it to 65 now. And I don't know if you've ever seen the technology. There's a technology curve that, going back to the steam engine, going back to the invention of the car, you can see a technology takes quite a while to get going. But then when it finally hits, the curve just goes up, just almost straight up. And if you look at the curve of recovery from religion, it's kind of the same way. it's been chugging along at a nice growth rate. And then all of a sudden it started really going up not long after you got on board. So, we have to blame you for a lot of our success here at this point in time.
I don't know.
Uh,
I've seen a similar thing with the YouTube views and subscription. I've seen the similar things with the number of volunteers and the participation or the attendance in the support groups. Yeah, that hockey stick type of graph.
Exactly. Right. Yeah. And we have, any organization has to have the infrastructure to support the weight of its mission. And I'm pretty confident with very soon, this is not futuristic, this is like next month or early next year, we'll be transitioning into our RfR 3.0 system. And that already, the testing of that already has allowed us to serve our clients at a much higher level and involve. I was just looking at our chats this morning, and we had 4 or 5 volunteers involved in chats, and from several different countries around the world, and they weren't stepping on each other. Our old system, volunteers stepped on each other all the time because that was our way of software. Anyway, I'm just happy that we had a vision. When was it, Gayle? 2.5, 3 years ago. With Gwen, with one of our board members, to expand our system, and she and several volunteers jumped in, and they've been really working hard for a long time on this. But there's 2 other things I want to throw out there. If we go back to some of what I think is possible, Eric, and that is, I think conceptually, one of the issues that I think is a hot item, and that is religious trauma. In 2009, when I started regarding religion, nobody had ever heard of that term, including me. I had never heard, because the term was not invented until a year or 2 later by Dr. Marlene Monell. But now, again, to use the technology curve, the hockey stick curve, we're seeing a gigantic expansion in the awareness of how religion impacts people at the psychological, even neurological level. So I see there's some opportunity for us to be participating in education around what religious trauma is, and perhaps to be involved in some research in the future around that.
Oh, wow.
I've been writing quite a bit about this and speaking about it in the last couple of years a lot. And I think we're seeing the awareness arise so much. I've recently gotten some inquiries from both South America and Europe around the notion of religious trauma. And, these are people who had never heard that before. And I think if you Google it, within the German-speaking nation language, you probably wouldn't find it until very, very recently. So we are on the cutting edge of something really big.
Yeah.
This is not a fad. This is empirically demonstrable that ideologies cause psychological problems. They exacerbate depression. They create trauma on people in ways that make them unable to function and thrive within their own societies. So we'll be working in that area a lot more, I think. And that leads me to the second thing you didn't. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
And this is such a wide-ranging issue. It's more than just the research, obviously, but the therapists need to be able to understand how to identify this with their patients. And even folks like myself who just had some traumatic religious experiences, now being able to put a name to it, being able to identify that this isn't just a thing in my head. This is real, and I need to find someone to help me process it. And
right.
That's fantastic.
Well, that's you hit me. You got ahead of me there.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's right. That's exactly where I wanted to go, was the psychotherapy project. The psychotherapy project has gone, as RfR overall has gone through 2 iterations in developing its systems and its software. And the basic structure of the psychotherapy project is excellent. It needs very little work, but we want to serve a lot more people, and we want to serve a lot more people in other countries and other languages. So we're one of our big next projects in terms of just our volunteer IT people is opening up the secular therapy project infrastructure and looking at it, how we can improve it and how we can make it more internationally friendly. It is internationally usable. Almost every nation in the world could still use it, but it's not. It's English. It's very English focused. So we can see a need for. I mean, we actually have a therapist in the Netherlands, for example. We have therapists in South Africa. And we know that there's plenty of opportunities for therapists to join us. One, if they know about us, and two, if we've got a language-friendly system. So I'm seeing that as a fairly short-term, 2 years out thing that's probably going to happen. I don't see any major impediments to it as long as our funding sources continue and our volunteer base expands into the South American area, Spanish-speaking area.
Gayle, what are your thoughts?
Well, what kind of executive director would not make a plea for donations? Let me tell you that all of these things, the most exciting, all this development and all of our vision, recovering from religion is unique among nonprofits. We provide everything that we provide to our clients is provided for free. The Secular Therapy Project is professional counseling, and that's standalone, and that's a relationship between the client and the therapist. That's conventional. But what we provide, the helpline, the support groups, the online community, all of these things we provide free to our clients. In fact, our fall excursion, we try to offer subsidies. We have a fundraiser and we try to reduce the cost of that so as many people as possible can attend to the limit that we can accommodate folks. But in order to do that, and we operate on a shoestring budget. We do the best we can because we are internet based. We're able to kind of streamline our costs. Before this session was the whole session on our finances, and so there's more information in there, and I don't want to repeat all of that. But the point I'm trying to make is in order to provide all of this at no cost to our clients, of course, we have to have some kind of revenue. We don't have membership fees, so to speak. All of our folks are volunteer folks. And so we certainly, they're doing their part, they're pulling their load. And so we are dependent upon the donations of folks who share our vision and who share our compassion for the folks who need what it is that we offer in order to function. And so we have very carefully developed our growth through the years. We use the word organic. We have continued to build our programs based upon the answer to the question, how can we help? And before we are very cautious about drifting away from our mission statement. So between trying to stay focused on our mission statement and requiring our development and our growth to be comprehensive and thorough. In other words, when someone comes to us with an idea, this is a great idea, let's do this thing. And I'll tell you, that happens even as recently as our online community. Well, maybe we could do an online community. That way they could talk to people with put a team together, put a proposal together, bring it to the board, let's talk it through. We do that with every one of our projects, our 14, 15, however many projects that we have, because we are so cautious and so careful with the dollars that have come from the donors who share our vision. That's earlier in my executive director interview, I said that our feeling for our volunteers is the closest thing to sacred that we get, the reverence that we show our volunteers. Well, I guess that very, very, very close to that is our reverence for our donor dollars. Those we have a deep understanding of what that means. Those of us who've come from a religious background, and I think about the giving that I did as a religious person and how almost cavalier I was about that. That's what the Bible said you had to do, and that's what you had to do. And it wasn't the same kind of thing as it is now as a secular person. The giving that I give now is so meaningful to me, and I take it so seriously. And being able to be a donor for Recovering from Religion and to see from the inside how carefully those dollars are used, I wish I could impart that. So as as those who are listening, as you gather together your thoughts about what your charitable giving is, about where should you put your donation dollars, you can be 100% assured that at Recovering from Religion, they go to provide hope, healing, and support to folks who are struggling with issues of doubt and non-belief. We have a platinum rating at GuideStar, which is a charity rating organization. We've kept that platinum rating for years because of our transparency and our accountability. So as folks listen to this, and if they've listened in sequence, man, they've been patient and they know as much about Recovering from Religion as you can know about that. Know that that piece of it is it's been such a privilege and such an honor to be part of managing that and to be part of partnering with folks who say, here are my dollars. How can I help someone with my dollars? It's been an utter joyful experience.
I think there's an area to look at also in the future, and that is the challenges that we will have. And we know that because we get challenges already. I mean, we've had challenges. And I think there's a negative side as well about the future. And I'd be happy to talk about that. And the negative side is staying focused on our mission. It's so easy to get distracted. It's so easy to get pulled to one side or pulled to the other side and go down a rabbit hole that doesn't focus on our mission. And I think our challenge, and this is really a challenge to the board of directors, it's a challenge to Gayle and I, it's how do we make sure that in this rapid growth with lots of new people coming in to help us and volunteers having new ideas, how do we make sure that these new ideas are fit within our mission? And we've had to turn down some good ideas because for various reasons. But one thing that happens, it doesn't happen to us as much anymore, I don't think, Gayle. But earlier on, 4 or 5 years ago, we would get all sorts of good ideas, but they were not focused on our mission. And when people think, oh, I've got a good idea and I want to go that direction, and the board says no, then you could have somebody unhappy about it, which has happened. It's not a really big problem, but I think what I'm trying to say is we're going to be successful if we stay close to our mission. And that is the challenge of the board. It's the challenge of Gayle. It's the challenge of me. And I look forward to that challenge because I think we've done something unique that it's related to my earlier work as an organizational psychologist. We focus everything we do on teams. If somebody is not willing to work in a team to accomplish something within Recovering from Religion, then it's not going to happen. And that prevents us from going down rabbit holes. It prevents us from implementing bad ideas. It prevents us from getting away from our mission, because when you've got one person with a good idea is great, but 5 people implementing that idea and all agreeing and moving with the permission of the board, and the directors, that's unstoppable. That is powerful. And it's such a good check and balance. And I think we see this regularly when, like right now in the Spanish speaking world, we want to expand down there and we will expand down there. But until we've got a team that is dedicated to it and understands our system and ready to work within that system, there's lots of people out there that don't want to work in a system. They want to invent their own. And our message to them is go ahead, invent your own. It took us 12 years to get here. But if you're going to come in our system, you'll work in our system. Systems are not bad things. Systems are the way you get things done. And if you don't have a good system, you're not going to get anything done. And the average person with a great idea doesn't understand that. And what we're trying to do, and I think we're doing a good job of it in many places, we're teaching people how to implement good ideas with a team. And there's a lot. I mean, you're a great example of it, Eric, of taking a good idea, several good ideas. I mean, RfR's is a great idea, but you had to demonstrate and you had to prove it. I don't think any of us had any clue what was going to happen to RfR's when you first proposed it. We thought, well, this is Eric, it's a good stopgap measure.
do this for a couple of months. That's a good idea.
Yeah, right. Boy, were we wrong. And and I think we're willing to admit we were wrong, and we're willing to let people. I think we give people a lot of leeway, a lot of space to implement ideas. And so anyway, that's where we're going there. And I think the challenges are something we're ready for, and we've got the system to support the ideas that do need to be implemented. I don't think we're anywhere near having explored all the good ideas. There's lots of good ideas out there that ultimately I don't even know what they are, but they'll be here in 5 years.
I've got one final question. I think I'm gonna spring it on you guys. Gayle, let's say we've got a couple of donors, and at January of 2022, they all write checks, and it comes to $1 million. Gayle.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't get there yet. Sorry.
Gayle and Darrel, what can the two of you do with because the organization has been, you said, a shoestring budget, and you're not kidding, like way less than $100,000 a year is what we're doing all of this stuff off out off of. What could we do with $1 million?
Oh my gosh, I love this game. Well, the first thing after you have peeled me off the ceiling or off of the top of the roof or wherever it is you find me after we find out that we've gotten this kind of donation. No, I think Darrel touched on it when he spoke just a minute ago. We have the system that we have built by intention is built for growth. It's built for exponential growth. Now, we can't create human beings. And so to match that, we have always had to play the balance game. When we talk about helping people, it takes two things. It takes dollars and it takes volunteers. It's just the nature of what the system is. So we have played this game for the years that I have been the executive director of watching where's our budget, where are the donations, and where are our volunteers. We don't want to have so many volunteers. That's a wonderful problem, but we don't want to have so many volunteers that they're frustrated, that they sit around watching a phone and it never rings and that kind of thing. But we certainly don't want to have too many clients where they're calling and they can't reach us. So we watch those numbers. We'll make a push and we'll do some social media boosts for volunteers when we feel the need to, okay, we need to bring a few more people in, get them trained, get them ready because the calls are coming in. But then just about the time we do that and we ramp up with volunteers, and we've got to accommodate on the other side. So our whole program is built on that kind of a balance. If we had funding like that, I can't even say the words, if we had funding like that, $1 million, we had that, the first thing we would do is we'd come together as a board, the executive director and the board of directors. We meet once a month. Darrel and I talk once a week. I don't know if you can tell it, but Darrel and I are profound friends. And sometimes when we have our talk, we actually talk about RfR. No, I'm kidding. We do talk, once a week to make sure that we're on the same page. We meet as a board of directors once a week, and to put the brilliant minds of the folks who are serving as the board of directors with something like this, it would be a sight to behold. I can't imagine the brilliance of the ideas that would come out of that. And then by extension, our leadership group, which is, as I said, these different divisions of recovering from religion, these 15, 17, 20 people that serve as leadership, to bring everyone together and to say, the first thing we're going to do is have a cocktail party so we can talk about what we're going to do. It might have to be virtual, to talk about each individual area. What would your area do? I mean, I could ask Eric Wells that question. If we came into this kind of funding, and with what you are doing with support groups, what could you do with an infusion of funding like that? Anyway, it's a hypothetical, but I love that game. And I think I hate to overuse expressions, but the proverbial sky is the limit is how RfR would handle something like that.
I would see very specific ways that we would use that funding. And the first way would be to systematically expand the excursion idea. We currently are subsidizing the excursion idea probably to the tune of 20 or 30% of the cost is actually subsidized. I don't think we'd want to go much higher than that in terms of just subsidy, because I don't think people respect what they don't pay for. So, and I think it's an important component that you should pay for. In some way, you should pay for what, and so you'll appreciate the value you receive. However, if we could expand that, which we could with a greater funding, we could expand it rather quickly, because we wouldn't have to worry about the financing, because that very first year you do something, you know you're going to lose money on it. And so we could set ourselves up to be doing it 2 or 3 or 4 other places and not be worried about losing money on the first year. The second year will come close to break even. Third year, well, we'll never make money off of it because we are subsidizing it by definition. So that's one thing I would see coming for. The second thing I would see is creating conferences around something like religious trauma. That's the idea I'm exploring even as we speak. A conference in South America with Spanish-speaking presenters under the auspices of Recovery from Religion on religious trauma, and taking place ideally in situ, in Brazil, in Chile, or wherever, actually being there and attracting people from all over those countries to talk about religious trauma. I mean, think about what that would do. And that would have to be heavily subsidized, because we wouldn't be able to charge people very much, although we would charge. We're never going to give away that kind of thing for free, because it's, for the same reason I said earlier. So I think the expansion into these other areas could rapidly be expanded. We would not be having to worry about our backs in terms of are we going to have money to keep operating next year. So those are 2 areas I would see, and that kind of financing could really benefit us a lot.
And you had mentioned research too, that it sounds like this might be able to kick off a little bit of research as well.
Well, I will tell you this, if we had that kind of funding, I'm positive we would be able to attract serious universities, university cooperation. We already have one potential university cooperative agreement out of Australia. And we would have to be careful and vet the university. But the interesting thing that's happening right now, it started years ago, but again, it's that hockey stick curve, is we're seeing much more interest at the academic level. I mean, just this year, a new organization started looking at religious trauma. We're looking at religion academically as in the way it should be looked at. What is its actual impact on a society, and acknowledging that it may give 10% good, but it's giving 90% bad. So let's face the bad, because nobody's ever looked at that before. There's plenty of room for that. And I think if we had some funding, to cooperate with the university, we would get academics wanting to do PhD dissertations on what we're doing. Wow. And we have data, we have people, we have systems. There's so much here, but you'd have to have somebody who really wants to understand what we do and how to gather the data through us in a way that respects our clients. And I'm sure we could do it. Funding would be one of the areas that would really expand that. I could see RfR having an entire research arm, a division just dedicated to research. And we almost got that right now.
Eric, you asked the question.
Yeah, don't be asking.
I love it. I'm excited. I'm kind of getting goosebumps just getting drawn into this vision.
Well, if you think about it, 2 of our leaders on the psychotherapy project are PhD levels people that have had, and our former one, or the 2 former directors of our psychotherapy, PhD, very highly published, very well researching kinds of academics, and they're sitting there waiting. I mean, if we called up Caleb Black and said, "Hey, Caleb, you got any master's level people that want to do the PhD level dissertation next?" He'd probably give us 2 or 3 people if we wanted. And right now, our 2, Tanya and Travis, both PhD, and Travis is a professor, at North Georgia State University. So we have connections already. We just don't have the funding. So, and we would pull some people and say, "Hey, you guys want to be on this research team?" And boy, that would be.
But we really haven't thought about this much, Eric.
I know, right?
We have given no thought whatsoever to the idea of big funding.
Yeah, there wasn't much of a pause between the question, asking the question or finishing the question and answering
From
it.
either one of us, right?
Well, guys, thank you so much for sitting down and talking with us. This will be the kind of the final video. Do you have any final thoughts that you want to leave us all with before we sign off with the series?
I hope that it's been a gratifying experience for you, Eric. It's been a lot of work for you, and I appreciate you pulling all of those together. I'm looking forward to the idea of having the access to be able to see what each individual part of recovering from religion does. You know, as I said, we have an annual leadership meeting so that each leader can hear what the other leader's doing, so that we have this comprehensive approach, 360 degrees, so to speak, about what we're trying to do, centered around providing help for our clients. And the idea of being able to access those on this YouTube channel and to see what each one of those areas are, not only does it help folks understand how we function, but if you are drawn to donate or to be a volunteer, it gives you more insider information. So thank you personally for doing this. And I so look forward to having it out for the general public to see.
I guess the last thing I would say is just thank you to all our volunteers. They give thousands of hours, and they deal with some pretty emotional issues, and they deal with grace. And I'm just honored to have people like that working side by side with us to help people who really do have some serious needs that were caused by the trauma of religious indoctrination. So that would be my final words, Eric.
Gayle, Darrel, thank you so much once again for joining me and sitting down with me.
Thank you.
Really appreciate it. Well, folks, you've made it through. This is going to wrap up the whole series on what RfR does and all of the various programs. And you've got to meet some fantastic people, some of my favorite people in the world. And I hope to see you either at an RfRX or in the helpline or at a support group meeting or in the volunteer or even on the donor list. I would love to see you there. So once again, thanks for watching.